Hey there, welcome to episode 63 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We're recording this again. I'll get into that in a moment. We're recording this again at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2024. I'm going to have to get some water because I didn't know I was going to be recording another episode of the same episode. It turns out I uploaded the recorded episode, and because my computer crashes when I'm editing audio, no other time, it's pretty much good unless I'm running Audacity to do the final edits. I tried to edit and I assumed it was good because normally I test everything before, but today, of course, I did not. And my entire upload was flagged by Spotify for using commercial music or something. So I played the episode and it was absolute audio garbage because my audio capture hardware needed to be, and this happens like 1 in 100 times, needed to basically be USB reset. So it sounded like a tinny nightmare that no one should hear. I mean, it's just awful. It sounds like noise. So we are take 2 on this episode. Who knows? Maybe it will be better. Maybe you'll never know. So yes, today's episode recorded on Wednesday, January 22nd at 7 p.m. again. Today we're going to speak about keto adventures, my own. None of this episode should be taken as advice, medical or otherwise. I am not a dietitian. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physiologist, not a chemist. I'm not most things. But these are my own adventures told from my perspective. If I ever say you, I'm talking to me. The generic you. So take this as informative, not even normative, certainly not authoritative, personal experiences, and basically what I've learned over the years and what's going on now and so on. So keto adventures, not keto advice, not keto recommendations, maybe some links and maybe some ideas, but take and do with those as you will, not advice. So on that note, I'm going to pause real quick, get some water. All right, so hopefully this will work out better this time. Quaggling sand is my own term that I came up with when I was very young for pins and needles. You may or may not call a return of circulation to maybe your arm or your hand or your foot or whatever when you've been sleeping on or leaning on or otherwise reduced or cut off circulation. When the feeling returns, there's that tingly pins and needles, or the correct term, quaggling sand. So this is an audio program about stories and recollections and random vanity conversation with myself. Maybe a guest someday, who knows, but mostly solo audio essays, which may be useful or maybe not. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, which I will read, the summary, and 4 links to shameless self-promotion and 2 relevant to today's episode. So let's begin, shall we? The summary of today's episode. Back in 2018, I decided to try out some different dietary schemes to see if I would feel better, more healthy, have more energy, become rich and famous, and so on. I settled on the keto diet, and I discovered that that is something of a loaded term, keto diet, especially getting started, because nobody seems to know what a keto diet actually is. It's probably more appropriate to say keto-friendly or keto-compatible diet, but you'll hear all of these and more terms intermingled as though they're the same. The links for today's episode, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo and Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. Shameless self-promotion, no obligation to spend any money. There's a profile page on the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo site. The profile page at the very top contains a link to the posts section. The posts section has my micro episodes published on Mondays called Buy Me an Update, exclusively on buymeacoffee.com. You can find in those episodes a quick rundown. They're under 5 minutes. Episode summaries from the previous week and whatever's coming up the current week. I think episode 10 will be for this coming Monday. Episode 9 was this earlier this week. So listen if you like. I also have links to my other audio programs on the profile page. Ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo does not enable the self-hosting on the site there of audio or video, which Buy Me a Coffee does. So I use Ko-fi.com for text links, text updates, I should say. And so check those out if you want. These are platforms used by content creators and open source project developers and so on as outreach and engagement to their audience, their users, and so on. So I've been using them for a long time. No obligation to spend money, like I said. So visit as you will, or don't. My Medium posts on medium.com, this is the first post of a series of about 8, I think, on my keto adventures from 2018 and after. So Danny DeKeto, like Danny DeVito, only keto. And finally, my blood meter of choice. This is not an affiliate link, but it is the unit I use for my quantified self measurements. If you're curious, it's not advice, not necessarily an endorsement. To be honest, their tech support people have been. I've given up on trying to reach or engage with them, but they were never really helpful and a little bit condescending. So customer support, hit or miss, but the device seems to be at least functional enough to be useful for me. So think about that if you want. So not an endorsement, not an affiliate link, just the Keto Mojo, the device that I use for ketone and glucose serum measurements. Basically, poke your finger, take a drop of blood, get a number, get 2 numbers, 2 separate strips, ketones and glucose. Anyway, on with the show. So motivation, why did I even get into a ketogenic diet notion? For the longest time, I felt like eating was always kind of the beginning of feeling tired, occasional stomach aches, or I guess like bloated maybe, or just not great. Like, I don't want to eat. I don't feel like eating. I shouldn't have eaten, etc. Generally not enjoying the aftermath, and a sense that I was just not eating healthy, especially as my metabolism has almost certainly slowed down, as it does for most people as we get older. So all this is kind of normal. Like I didn't feel like sharp pains or nausea, things like this. Just never felt like eating was worthwhile for the sort of the downside, I guess. It just never felt like, ooh, I'm glad I ate that. It was always more of a, why do I shouldn't eat? So it wasn't like an eating disorder. It was just clearly something not working. I had looked into probiotics and fiber and whatnot, and it turns out those things are good, but it's a whole system approach. I had been traveling to other countries as part of my job with Intel for a couple of years. So I was able to escape the typical U.S. grocery store and restaurant selections, and I tried foods in other places. I think there may have been some better options for me in that regard, but not for long enough to be really testable. So the longest period of time I was outside of the United States was 5 weeks in Ireland. Not long enough for science. So, I got a feeling like, I never felt quite as, I'll say negative for the times that I was traveling, but I never really had the time to focus on sort of measurements or comparisons in a useful way that would be meaningful. So it was like, yeah, it is what it is. I used to go to the gym all the time, especially when I was in college. And after college, I still had my gym membership at 24 Hour Fitness for many years. They were still in business, of course. Thanks to a contract strangeness, oddity, when I renewed my membership one time, I ended up with the highest level of highest level of membership they offered on an annually renewing contract at a super reasonable rate. Nobody balked at it because they would do promotions and so on. So they just said, oh yeah, you have the highest level of membership we offer. So I had that, and I could go to any gym. And so I did that often. But the gym location near me was open 24 hours, as it implies in the name. But I would drive there. Sometimes I would ride a bicycle there. So it wasn't nearby. Turns out it was about 3 miles. And so I would go there, but then once I was traveling, I didn't go to the gym nearly so much. So generally speaking, my health was not as good as it was. And you can always be healthier, right? So I started doing some research. I started out with a vegetarian-ish diet, basically cutting out meat. I had protein powder to try to balance that. I understand vegetarians don't always get some of the nutrition that's found in a non-vegetarian diet. So I didn't do much research. I figured, okay, let me just cut out meat, see if that has any sort of short-term measurable results, improvement. I tested the waters for a few weeks to decide if this was something I could do, or if I wanted to pursue this. And I didn't really get much upside out of it, I guess. I don't know what I was looking for specifically. Just a general improvement would have been nice. Like, oh, I feel much better. It turns out I really wasn't eating that much meat though. So I wasn't doing like, oh, I got to have steak and hamburgers every day. Not even close. So, okay, I'll try cutting out some dairy. And that was really the big change. From very little to zero meat, no dairy, like no ice cream and stuff. Obviously, removing the sugar was probably a good thing, but I didn't really feel like this was the magic. So I started seeing more mentions of a ketogenic diet. And by the way, I tried doing more of a paleo at some point. So kind of the other end of the spectrum. Okay, I'll just eat meat, mostly fish and chicken, occasional burgers and stuff. And that's it. No, I don't know if I did it for long enough to really get a good sense, but I kind of didn't see this pointing in the right direction. I started seeing more mentions of a ketogenic diet. Heard a few colleagues, mostly like friends on Facebook from college or other random people here and there, like, oh, I'm doing keto, give it a try, blah, blah, blah. I did some reading. I do a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading in this case as well. So, and I had seen something a few years prior, kind of in passing. I saw something like, oh yeah, okay, keto, what is this? Oils and fats and taking measurements, and you have to be careful from this and too much of that. And the message was that it was somehow unhealthy, and so I didn't really give it much thought after that. I had mentioned a keto diet to a trainer at the 24-Hour Fitness, and he was like, oh no, you don't want to do that. So I had received some negative finger pointing casually, like not intensely, but I kind of never really dove into it. But I was like, okay, now I'm gonna actually see what this is. And I was in a testing mode, like, let me try this and see what happens. There was, even when I was looking at it though, there was this like, oh, it requires a lot of testing and maintenance. You have to test your blood serum levels for ketones, and you have to measure the fat intake and so on. And what I was finding was that, I was hearing that it was complicated, but what I found, I should say, eventually is it's not really that complicated. So I don't know why there was some negativity, but not my findings. So the truth is, figuring out what constitutes a keto diet, put that in air quotes if you want, is more difficult than actually following a keto-friendly diet, so long as you're willing to take some measurements in the early days to figure out what a keto diet is for you or for me. So you kind of have to start with what is ketosis and what's the motivation, then construct a diet that works for you with that information, if that makes sense. So yeah, keto diet to me, having learned all this, is a diet that places you in and leaves you in ketosis, which is a certain level of ketones in your blood and a certain blood glucose level also in your blood. So if you consume a diet that leaves you in a state of ketosis, then it's a ketogenic diet for you, or a keto-friendly diet if you like. This is hard to reckon with if you're told this is keto, but it somehow throws your blood sugar off or something. So it's really important, especially initially, to have that awareness. And even better if you do have a blood glucose / ketone meter that you can measure the impact on your own state of affairs, your own readings, based on what you're eating, not what you're told. That's one reason why, again, this is not advice. This is my experience. And if you take something from it, one of the things you should take from it is you got to check your own readings, or go to a doctor and have them do it. You got to know what you're eating and why. You got to know what's going on, what's supposed to happen, what's actually happening, and so on. And so I can give you my take on my experiences, and that's how this should be consumed. So the first steps, once I decided to jump in. So from some of the reading and the YouTube videos I watched by some actual, like, authoritative people, not just random Although a couple of people had been doing keto dieting for quite some time, so they were, the recipe ideas and so on. But I was mostly consuming either doctors or people in nutrition in general that were focused on and had done actual research on keto and ketogenic diets and the results and the mechanisms and so on. Or the reading I was doing was in that direction. So not just random people. Be wary of people who give you keto advice and they deviate wildly. Like, this doesn't sound like anything that anyone else has described. Be careful. So I watch these, and I do have a list of some of those on one of the later, I think kind of halfway through, on one of the Danny to Keto posts on Medium. I did not go through and check and see if they're all still available and accessible. So your mileage may vary. But I think it's Dr. Fong in Australia is really interesting, even though his presentation style is a little unusual. It's, I won't say endearing, but it's different. But he has some interesting and insightful comments and insights and knowledge and actual studies and actual clinical interactions using a ketogenic diet as part of some programs. So that one was, so anyway, you can find all that in one of the Medium posts. And it sounded like keto works best from those initial examinations from me. It works best on an OMAD or 1 meal a day approach to eating. It's a consolidated form of intermittent fasting. So some people will say intermittent fasting is like eat for 8 hours in an 8-hour window and then don't eat. That's not really, I mean, okay, sure. To me, an intermittent fasting would be, well, in this case, eat one. So don't eat two meals in the space of like 4 hours. Eat one meal, just one sitting, and it could be sometime in a 4-hour window. That's different. So maybe if you have an 8-hour eating window, but you only eat one meal, then you don't need to do an 8-hour window. So I guess it gives you flexibility when you're going to eat your one meal. But for me, I like to do at least 18 hours and usually 22 hours. And that gives me 2 hours to just pick a time and have a snack and whatnot. If you do 2 hours, you can eat towards the beginning of the 2 hours. And then the rest of the 2 hours, you kind of let your meal settle in, start digesting and so on. So essentially I'm at 22-2, 1 meal a day in intermittent faster. I was not normally a quantified self person outside of maybe whatever my smartwatch was picking up when I was traveling, because a smartwatch will get the correct time when you land. So I didn't have to worry about like, which time zone am I in? It was just look at the watch. When's my next flight? What's going on? So practicality led me to a smartwatch, and then they're measuring motion and so on. Your accelerometer can measure your when you're walking and so on. So you got some data there, and okay, since it showed the correct time, and that was great. And and it tells me if I'm walking a lot. Okay, good. But I wasn't really tracking that. In the interest of trying to decide what was really happening, though, I did purchase some urine test strips to measure ketone levels. These are not accurate, and they're not really useful, to be honest, for what I needed. Or they're useful to tell you if you have a lot of ketones in your system, which can be useful maybe if you're into in a sports, in an athletic situation, and you want to know if you have elevated ketones. Generally speaking, though, I did not find that the urine test strips were good. So I would learn that along the way. And eventually I would get a better smartwatch, more of a sport-oriented watch to actually measure like heart rate, an assessment of activity levels, and obviously how far I was walking and so on. So I had some quick lessons that I learned early on. The main thing I learned, urine test strips are not accurate. So there you go. Blood serum measurements, any device that would measure them, such as the one I linked to, that actually does ketone and glucose with an actual number that is actually reasonably accurate, is much better. So I have never even thought about test strips again. So get a device. If you are interested in this, that would be, it's not advice, but that is something to note, the vast difference in the quality of the data you're getting on yourself. Fasting matters, the theory behind the keto diet, and this is why it's important to start with what's supposed to happen and then go to what your diet could be. In the most general sense, is to keep the number of minutes, you can say hours if you want, but to minimize the amount of time your body spends excreting insulin and digesting food to a minimum. So it prevents you from entering a state of where your body is trying to digest carbohydrates and then storing them, which is what insulin is good for. So it regulates your blood sugar level by storing glucose in your fat cells, or probably more correct to say glycogen, but so it's storing your carbs, right? So it's how you gain weight. Stored energy, by the way, is stored so that you can use it later. That's important. So if you reduce your eating time window, so for me, 2 hours, sometimes 1 hour. So you just eat that one time. There's a window of time where your body will say, oh, okay, food. So we got to set up for digestion and metabolism. We're going to get some insulin flowing. We're going to regulate levels of blood sugar and so on. So if you minimize the number of carbs you're eating and you keep that window tight, short, brief, then any insulin that enters your bloodstream doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any carbohydrates to sugars to store. So you end up kind of remaining in a state of ketosis. Whenever you eat anything, you're going to, the ketone levels will vary a little bit. But end of the day, the goal of a ketogenic diet, as I understand it, so for me, my goal, minimize the amount of time during which my blood insulin levels are elevated, minimize the amount of blood glucose that can be measured, and then minimize the amount of time I spend actually eating to one meal a day. So this should result in an elevated blood ketone level. So my serum ketone levels measurable by the same meter, the Keto Mojo thing. Keep those levels at something like close to 2 is pretty, I'm not going to say easy, but that was kind of for me, that worked. So 2 millimoles per milliliter, millimoles of ketone per milliliter or microliter. I can't remember now. Either way, I set the settings and I don't look at the units too much. I just go, okay, it's 2, it's 1.5, it's 0.07 or 0.7. So you're either in ketosis or not, but even that is more of an indicator. Don't trust the accuracy of a home meter like that. So I would look at the number and say, okay, that's about where it should be, I think, after whatever the state of my fasting and food consumption and intake had been. Low carb, this is the other thing, low carb, in quotes, means different things to different people. Some people, especially in the case of a study in that context, if you read the study, you'll say people could eat 300 grams of carbohydrates during an 8-hour period. Okay, that might be relatively low, but that's not a low carb diet for me. Other people will say, oh, it's maybe if it's 1% of your total caloric intake, whatever food you're eating, 1% of the calories should come from carbohydrate. So fats and proteins, if I'm recalling correctly, you can check me on this, are 5 kilocalories. So food calories, 5 food calories per gram, while fat is 9 food calories per gram. So you can do the math and you can say, okay, so per gram, I should have this many calories of this if I want a total caloric input or intake for the day. So you can do all that math for yourself, and these numbers are floating around, so you can figure this out. But because there's no one standard low carb line, somebody can say low carb and they might mean anything and you have no idea. And if you only look at headlines, you will say, oh, okay, low carb diet. That's like a keto diet. Not always. The keto flu is a real thing. This is where you don't feel well when you're trying to start a keto diet, a keto-friendly diet. You can avoid it once you understand what's going on. When you are entering ketosis, when your blood ketone levels are up and your blood glucose level is down, before that really happens early on, you have to kind of get rid of all the glucose in your system. Not all of it, but so your blood sugar will drop down, and then your some glycogen is stored in your muscle fibers. So your body will say, oh, we got to get that stuff out. So let's finish off the glycogen. Once your glycogen is leaving your muscle fibers, your muscles can no longer store as much water. So you'll start to lose water weight, and that'll be like, ooh, look, I've lost a couple pounds already. That's water because you're peeing it out. Well, when you're peeing out all that water, you're taking some minerals with you. So You got your calcium and magnesium and potassium and sodium and all these electrolytes that, sports drinks have. You sweat a lot on the field. You got to drink some electrolytes. Guess what? If you're peeing all of your moisture out of all of your muscles, your minerals doing the same thing. So you either have to replace them with supplements or try to increase the foods that you're consuming that have those nutrients, the minerals, and you can at least mitigate the keto flu effect, which I would learn after the first time. I also learned, for example, if you get some cramps, muscle cramps, those are caused by a shortage of a shortage of calcium, I think it is. And I think it's calcium, right? And if you feel a little wobbly, like uncoordinated, or you're having trouble focusing, that could be a shortage of potassium. So both cases, when I had those symptoms, I took some, like, for example, I have potassium salt, like a salt replacement. So it's potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride. Put a little bit on a spoon onto the tongue. And then, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, it's as though I never felt wobbly and weird. And so dehydration can also, so just drink plenty of water and make sure you're replacing some of those minerals as you are peeing them out. That's not advice, but that's what happened to me. If that helps you, great. If your blood glucose goes up for long enough, if you see changes in your personal trends, very obviously, which is, wait, what am I writing here? If your blood glucose levels go up for long enough. Okay, so, sorry. This is the second time I'm going through this, so I should know. If you see your blood glucose levels going up for some reason and they're staying up, you will see changes in your personal trends, very obviously, which is one reason to actually keep track of personal data. So when you see your blood glucose going up, like, what's going on here? And you can think back, what have I been eating? What have I been doing? It turns out if you eat a lot of protein, your body can convert some of that to glucose. So just something to be aware of. So if you want to test your own, responses, you can take a reading with your meter, ketones, glucose. Okay, then eat something. I want to see what happens when I eat a hamburger, just the meat part, not the bun. I want to see what happens when I eat some salmon or some fish or some other fish or some chicken or something. So you eat something. Try to keep it simple so you're not mixing in breading or sugary sauces. So what happens if I eat this protein source? And then you measure, usually they say 30 minutes to get some digestion going. And if you see your blood glucose level going up, then you'll see, that's what happens. If it stays high, your body is not reacting quickly to the elevated glucose levels. So that's an insulin sensitivity versus resistivity issue. And you can look that up for yourself, see how that works. And so taking these readings helps with the meter, or however you can go see a doctor. These will tell you how your systems are working. By the way, have you ever wondered why they say fast before you go for some tests? They want to make sure your blood glucose isn't elevated and your insulin's high. So depending on what they're testing for, they want to see what your body's doing when it has not had a meal, when it's not in a metabolizing state. You can actually see those things happening if you have one of these meters and you're actually checking kind of through the day. That is not something you'll do for the rest of your life. It's something you can do during a personal research phase. So I didn't, after a while I was like, okay, I don't really need to test my blood every day, right? There were times when I was doing it before and after meals and so on because I wanted to see what the effect was. But then after a while you're like, okay, I know how I feel. I know what I ate. I know what does what. Then it becomes kind of like riding a bicycle. Exogenous ketones are not cheating, but they're also a false positive. So some people take exogenous ketones or they'll do the ketone gummies, the keto gummies. That's some magic pill. If you don't consider them if you're going to do a test strip, as the saying goes, you're literally peeing out the ketones that you're trying to consume for the sake of this. Like, oh, look, I'm in ketosis. No, you just dumped a bunch of ketones into your bloodstream and now you're peeing them out. So they're not always a true indicator of your kind of metabolism state. So I tried out ketones initially in conjunction with fasting, so that I had some sense of like, okay, if I don't eat any food and I increase the amount of ketone that I've consumed, so exogenous ketones, external ketones, let me see how that feels. So I would, and you can see, if you want to see what an elevated ketone level looks like, you can see that. But you have to be aware that you're just literally peeing them out. Nothing's really happening. But I had like one container of powder that I would, after that, I was like, okay, I don't really need this because I think, based on my measurements, I think I'm actually entering a nutritional ketosis based on the foods that I'm eating and not eating, and when I am not and eating and not eating those foods. So exogenous ketones, they're not like a magic bullet. They don't do anything spectacular. I don't believe it's a good idea. Like, it confuses me that people think eating a keto gummy does anything other than put ketos in your bloodstream that you're going to pee out. Because if you do consume sugar, carbohydrates, your body will prefer those most likely. So basically, the keto flu hits when you're in ketosis in those early days. So you've been peeing out your minerals and so on. If you consume foods or supplements with the electrolytes, they're electrolyte powders that you can add to water. They don't have sugar. Gatorade is kind of high in sugar and some other stuff. So you can get some pure electrolytes, or you can just try to increase the amount of food items that you consume that have those as included mineral nutrients. So I didn't find, the first time it happened, I was like, oh, I don't feel well. So based on the reading, I said, oh, okay, so I just need to increase my intake of these things, and I didn't really have any problems with that after. So if you understand the cause of the keto flu, as they call it, so you can do some reading about that. The solution is not too difficult, and it's probably just a good idea anyway. If you are storing less water in your muscles, then you may have fewer ways to store minerals. So just increasing the foods that you consume that have those minerals in them will just keep a steady supply of minerals. And then I found for myself that I did add like a multivitamin, which generally speaking are not sufficient sources of the things that are listed as ingredients on those. However, I basically treat it as okay, it's kind of to level off. If I'm fasting, it just keeps whatever's in the multivitamin. Maybe there's sufficient quantities to make a difference, maybe not. But it didn't really hurt anything, and your mileage may vary wildly. But just be aware that when your mineral levels drop, they can make a substantial difference in your state of well-being. That's what I found for me, and if that is a thing to research for yourself. If you come across any studies that look like low-carb diets are the thing, or that they are dangerous or whatever, you must read the fine print. They will conflate keto diets, keto-friendly diets, and low-carb diets. They're all the same. They're all identical. At the end of the day, it is important to know how your own body, your own system, how personal serum glucose and ketone levels change, how you feel, what's going on, based on your nutritional intake and what you're doing, what's happening. If you say low carb, usually it's the loosest form of intermittent fasting. So like I said, the 8-hour window or something. They won't constrain carbs or type of carbs. So you may consider leafy green vegetables and the fiber or a bowl of ice cream as the same, but bioavailability becomes an issue you can look up. So leafy green vegetables are generally good. And if they have high fiber, they'll say, ooh, there's a lot of carbohydrates, but it's all fiber, so it doesn't get digested like sugar, right? So it's something to be aware of that when someone says low carb, they may or may not be speaking keto. It may not be a keto-friendly diet. It's just lower in carbs than a typical American diet, which is like 100% carbohydrate. So read the fine print, read the nature of the study and the details. Don't believe the headlines. Study says low carbohydrate, study says keto diet is dangerous. If you see that and then you read and they say, oh, we were following a low carbohydrate diet, 300 grams of carbs over an 8-hour eating window, and you're like, that's not a keto-friendly diet. Not for me. It might not be for anyone, but definitely not for me. I already know what my keto-friendly diet is. Speaking of my own program. So I wrote my Medium posts mostly to respond to anyone who started off with, you know what you should do? You know what you should try? Anyone who started to tell me why they didn't like keto anything and you should try this and this is better and you got to have bread, you got to have carbs. So guess what? Your mileage may vary. Your dietary choices are your own. Your motivation is your own. And if you take advice from anyone with an opinion, you might put your health or at least your own well-being at risk. Like, oh, I guess I should eat bread because somebody told me, I guess. So take your measurements, do your reading, figure out what's working for you. Go see a doctor if you need to. But don't take random advice like, oh, I can never stick to a keto diet. I need to have bread or whatever, right? So everything in this episode, everything in my Medium posts, anything I have to say on the subject now or forever after is based on my own experiences about me. Even if I say you, I'm talking to myself. It is not advice to anyone. I was going to say to you, but that's just to me. The links and resources might be useful if you consider those advice, but that's on you. But what you do with those is up to you, not me. And when I say you, I guess I mean me. So anyone listening to this who visits the Medium posts and consumes anything that's there, that's up to your better judgment. And I don't mean me, but I might mean me. Maybe I do. Once I started taking my serum levels with the meter, so ketone and glucose blood levels, and tracking my activity levels, correlating those, and then noting when I was eating and so on, these were obvious. So these are going to be a bunch of bullet items. I'll tell you right now, I'm going through this more efficiently, so I've probably shaved off like 20 minutes from the first time I recorded this. Hopefully it will sound okay. You'll find out. So OMAD, like I said, works better for me, so that's 1 meal a day. And I do best with at least 18 hours of fasting, as I think I mentioned. So 22 hours is the typical. So I don't eat for 22 hours, and then I have 2 hours to eat. I try to eat at the beginning of the 2 hours, and then that gives you some time, gives me some time for the digestion to begin and whatnot. You can't say you're fasting when you just ate, because it's not when the food goes in your mouth. It's when your body is done digesting them. So fasting, the reason to fast is to have your body not be in a state of digestion and metabolism. You're supposed to be in a state, it's not metabolizing food you just ate. So you should be, you should be done digesting the food you ate, ideally. So, technically you start fasting when you stop digesting, right? So we can parse terms and whatever. So for me, I say after 2 hours now, I set the fasting clock again. Because at the end of the day, really what matters not is the time, but really if you are looking at your ketone and glucose levels and how you feel and other things, right? So it's not the time on the clock. That's like a guide, but that's not the rule. That's not the final arbiter. It's the readings. It's how you feel. It's what's actually happening, not the time on not a timer, not a reading on a clock. During my eating window, I would prepare what was basically a Mediterranean-inspired salad, not Mediterranean necessarily, with rice, cauliflower, and spinach and kale and Brussels sprouts as like a base. So starting with cauliflower literally at the bottom and then throw in some things. Maybe some sun-dried tomato, sometimes some cherry tomatoes, which are a little bit more of a challenge, especially me with my allergies. So the lectins on the skin of the tomatoes, your mileage may vary, but every once in a while, some cherry tomatoes were good. Sunflower seeds, or maybe some crushed walnuts, or some pumpkin seeds. Sometimes some feta cheese. Sometimes some shredded mozzarella. So sometimes, but more often feta cheese in this case. Just went better in the mix. Some olive oil drizzled on top. Occasionally, maybe some balsamic vinegar, but that was less frequent. Some olive oil, some black pepper, maybe some red pepper. Spices are free. They're, dry spices are generally zero impact. So for flavor, might as well. So black pepper was good, or what else? Black pepper. There were a couple things, but anyway, just keep it mixed up. Something interesting. Frequently some avocado. Avocado is one of those really, really good sources of vegetable fats, which are great. I mean, you can eat an avocado every day and you'd probably be better off. Occasionally some protein like chicken, or probably, I don't know if I would put the salmon in here or just have it off on its own separately. That's always good with some mustard on it. I know that sounds weird, but spicy mustard on salmon. delicious. Occasionally some hard-boiled egg, slice that up, throw that on there. Eggs are generally keto friendly, but do your own research on that. What does that mean for you to consume eggs, and what should be looking for? You should be looking for. Every once in a while, I would have about, like I said, 3 or 4 ounces of wild-caught smoked salmon for the omegas and the protein, obviously, or some chicken for the protein. My goal is to keep my carb level as close to 0 as possible. So with fiber carbs are not counted in my universe, but they're generally not the same as sugar, for example. So if you ate a bowl of spinach, there's going to be some carbohydrates in the fiber of the plant, and those will say, oh, it's 2 grams of carbohydrates in fiber. But if you eat a bowl of ice cream, it might be like 25 grams of sugar. That's very different. Even if you ate enough, like 12 times as much spinach to get all those grams of carbohydrate, they would still be in the fiber, and they're not going to enter your bloodstream, not nearly so quickly, if at all. So your blood glucose level does not really get impacted, in my own case anyway, by eating spinach or other fibrous carbohydrates. So I don't really count those. So if you're just counting, if I put some feta or, who knows, whatever I would add to my typical base, there might be a few carbs in there. There might be, it just depended. So I was trying to keep it around 10, maybe a maximum of 25 grams of carbohydrates per day. So that's pretty low. To me, that's a low carb diet. Exercise for me is critical if I'm on a weight loss track. If my daily minimum activity, baseline was 100%, that 100, that's what I'm aiming for. Then I found that about 300% every other day was useful. So I would walk to the gym, the 24-hour. I would do my some cardio and some weight training. Then I would walk home. So 3 miles walking to warm up, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour in the gym, and then another walk home. I was never rushing, so it was essentially 1 hour to walk to the gym, 3 miles an hour. Casual walk pace, 1 hour at the gym, 1 hour to walk home. That's a lot of time, but at the end of the day, it worked for me. So 300% of my target every other day, plus the keto, maintaining ketosis using my dietary controls, ended up with the results I was looking for. If I did not visit the gym or get that level of exercise some way, or if I strayed from my keto focus, that I was no longer in ketosis, I would enter a sustaining mode. So I wasn't necessarily, I wasn't gaining weight or losing progress or feeling bad just by deviating a little bit. Now, if I cracked open a gallon of ice cream with some cheesecake and went nuts, that'd be different. But if I was, we're visiting friends or we're going to a birthday party or whatever it is, life continues. So I would have a keto Cheeto day every once in a while. Sometimes on Fridays, if I went to a food truck event, so keto Cheeto, like cheating. So I might have the rice with the Asian dish from the Filipino food truck or whatever it was, right? So completely guilt-free and predictable, because when you know how a cheat day works and the impact on your blood glucose and ketone levels, you can take that into account and you say, okay, well, it's going to take this long to return to ketosis and to the levels that I need, and I can just go back to the gym on the next day or whatever it is. So the impact of grabbing some food truck food or a snack, or maybe you feel like having some pretzels, or who knows, right? You can do so guilt-free and understand what the impact will be, what the, quote, recovery is, and then get on with your normal day-to-day keto process and pursuits. I personally benefit from what was called a bulletproof coffee. Now I think it's pretty common, so I don't know if people still call it that. But it's a coffee with MCT oil, that's medium chain triglyceride oil. I get some oil that's 97 or 98% C8, which is the version of medium chain triglycerides derived from coconut oil that enter your bloodstream most effectively and most quickly, so you don't digest them. They just are ketones, essentially. They're available for use. I've graduated so I used to have black coffee with MCT oil, and that was it. And that's not very exciting, to be honest. I've graduated to a morning AeroPress coffee with MCT oil and frothed Does that make sense? I don't have a steamer, but I have a rotary frother. So I put some heavy cream in there and then some sugar-free Torani syrup, and then I actually put a little bit of salt in there, some Baja Gold coarse salt, so it's not like putting in table salt. It's like it's more like rock salt almost. So you get a little bit of a salt in there, and if you've ever had a salted what is it called? Salted foam, is it? Salted foam beverage at Starbucks or something. It's good. So it's in the foam. It's not in the coffee. So you're getting it mixed in with this heavy cream. Heavy cream is keto friendly. Milk, not so much. Milk actually has sugar. Heavy cream, pretty much fat. Almost zero carbohydrate. Check the label. So I end up having like a morning cappuccino with the the frothed heavy cream and some of the salt in there, and then maybe a salted caramel Torani sugar-free syrup pump in there. Delightful. So I start my day with a keto-friendly coffee with some MCT oils and some caffeine. And don't forget, coffee is a diuretic, so you'll be peeing in no time. For the most part, rather than focusing on a calorie number, that's the number I give here below. Yeah, I'm going to talk about it next. The number I give here of 1800-ish is something I measured a couple times just to kind of get some idea, but I don't watch that number. I'm not totally concerned about that. I focus on prioritizing what you might call healthy fat intake. So olive oil, don't have corn oil, don't have stuff fried in corn oil. So fried foods are not bad for you for the fats. It's because of the types of fats. So corn oils, saf oils? No, what is it called? Canola oil, horrible. There's another one. Why am I not remembering this? Whatever it is. Essentially, MCT oil, obviously, but don't cook with it because it's too expensive. Coconut oil, not bad, but it's not as clean as the derived MCTs. But coconut oil is okay. Avocado oil, good. Stay away from peanut oil. So these are things you can read about and determine why I'm saying this. So this is not advice. These are pointers to follow up on what types of fats you should or could consider cooking with. Corn oil is not so healthy. Nuts, some nuts are good. Pecans and macadamia nuts. Some are not as good. Cashews, unfortunately. So you can determine which fats from nuts are good. Nuts are a good source of healthy fats in some cases. So do your research on those, and you can figure out which work for you and which do not or might not. So how you prepare foods, and again, like technically you could have I've had Parmesan cheese crusted fish, not fried, so like air fried. So the Parmesan cheese is not, I'm not going to say it's carb free, but it's not breadcrumbs, right? It's you can get Parmesan crackers. So they're pressing Parmesan into and then toasting it or cooking it so that it gets crispy or has a shape, and then you can use that in place of bread or crackers or so on. So I've had that, and then you air fry instead of deep frying, and so you're not adding this weird extra who knows what is in a fat fryer. So those are good to me. And so if you're careful with what kinds of fats you're putting in your body, it's important to note, you can do some reading on this yourself, but the guy who invented the bulletproof coffee, and that whole notion, he is quick to point out that carbohydrates are pretty much fructose, glucose, sucrose. They're all essentially the same molecule, where the hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen are, how many of this and that. They're all the same, pretty much. Fats, there's tons of different kinds. Proteins, what is it he says? There's a difference between, say meat, say a hamburger, and spider venom, but they're both proteins. Or rattlesnake venom, these are proteins. So there's a vast difference between proteins and fats, but carbohydrates are pretty much the same. So selecting what you can call healthy fats is actually important. And in my case, I want to get as many of my daily calories from healthy fats as possible and avoid sugar. And noting that fiber in vegetables is not the same as refined sugars or bread or pasta, or processed grains. So I focus on satiety. So you eat. So during my eating time, if you like, that sounds so weird, but one meal a day. So when I'm kind of hungry, I can eat something. I'll make my usual and say it's like 1,800 or 2,000 calories. So that's like a whole day of food, but you're going to get it all in one swath. But because calories from fat, there's 9 food calories per gram. It's either 9 or 7. I think it's 9, but it's more than fat and protein. So if your diet is fat rich, healthy fat rich, avocados, eggs for protein and fat, cholesterol, healthy cholesterol, and very low in simple carbs, right? The vegetable fiber doesn't count. You're basically getting a ton of calories that are going to be digested well and are not going to raise your insulin level, so they're not going to be stored. So all the food you're eating is for energy, not for storage. And if you run out of energy, guess what? That's what stored energy is for. You're starving yourself. No, I ate today and I still need some more energy, so luckily I have some stored. I think there's a little bit too much stored. So good for me. So if you're able to fit your diet around the one meal a day thing, and if you can fit all those calories into a brief one sitting, and I got to be honest, most people eat more than 2,000 calories in a sitting if you're eating an American diet. So they call this eating to satiety, which is like, okay, that was enough, I'm good. Or, oh, you know what, I'm still a little bit, I kind of feel like I want to eat something else. I'll have maybe I'll have a piece of chicken, or I'll have another avocado. The possibilities are endless. Maybe I'll snack on some macadamia nuts or some pecans, which are additional healthy sources of fat. They have fiber also. So some of the carbohydrates that are in the plant structure there, same thing, fiber. So of course, check your own results on these, but at the end of the day, you eat to satiety, or eating until you are sated. And then all those words mean the same thing, satisfied. I think I'm good. Don't have to eat anymore. I'm good. Once you are fat adapted, as they say, consuming carbohydrates, especially straight sugar like ice cream, cake, donuts, is noticeable and caused me, from my experience, I just felt weird. My keto Cheeto days moved away from like, oh, I can have some ice cream today, to more of a, oh, I can have some savory. Maybe I'll have a pasta dish, or I'll have some rice with the chicken or something. So a little bit of rice, not so bad. So on a Cheeto day, I'm comfortable with not being so attentive to my carbohydrate percentage, so I can enjoy. And by the way, it's you shouldn't feel bad for your food choices. So it's not really a diet. You're not going on a diet. Because by the way, here's a little secret, and anyone will tell you this. Once you are interested in pursuing a keto friendly, or a lifestyle in ketosis, if you like, when you consume carbohydrates, you will begin gaining weight. So if you decide, I think I'm going to go off keto and I'm just going to go back to normal, your body will start saving up all those carbs. The insulin will help you create and fill fill the fat cells. And then you'll start retaining water, because your muscle fibers will store the glycogen, and then you'll have extra water handy. So you'll find if you go off keto, the first thing you'll start to do is retain water and start gaining some weight, as your body says, oh, we got to store some of this. Who knows if this person's going to try this crazy keto thing again. So you have to pay attention to that. Rice, by the way, is not much better for you than ice cream. And if you just steam some rice and cook it, you can see what the impact is on a personal blood glucose response to steaming the rice and then cooling it in a refrigerator overnight. That will restructure the carbohydrate, and it's called resistant starch. That's what I couldn't think of it the first time around. So, yay! Resistant starch is starches that your body won't digest as easily, if at all. So I have unmodified potato starch, for example, which is a resistant starch. I use that as a prebiotic, so I can use that with some probiotics, plus the resistant starch, plus some glucomannan, plus some inulin, and I end up with a little slushy or a kind of a shake, a high fiber shake that is prebiotic with probiotics added. And that is not necessarily, I've not really checked my blood sugar after this, but the net impact is more healthy from a gut microbiome standpoint. But you end up with resistant starch from a rice. It's a different form of resistant starch. You may end up with less of a spike from eating rice. Generally speaking, though, high density carbs that are so easily broken down, like rice and bagels. Who doesn't love bagels, right? Bagels and cream cheese, bam. But bagels are super high density carbohydrate source. So not ideal. If you're going to have something with cream cheese on it, make it some Parmesan. So this is my high level view. My food choices are based on minerals and micronutrients. I don't know if spinach really supplements magnesium sufficiently on its own, but spinach is good either way, and it shows that it does have magnesium. So that's one of the sources, but I have a diet that's intermingling all these vegetables and so on. So I try to construct a diet that accounts for those. My calorie intake was very roughly 1,800 calories with this normal meal. It could go up over 2,000 if I was adding some chicken or salmon, depending on how many eggs I threw in there, maybe some other variations, but typical baseline around 1,800 calories. And, maybe you had feta in there, whatever else thrown in there, somewhere in that range, which essentially the concern for me was like, I don't want to have a calorie deficit because that can throw off some of your metabolism. Your body will try to enter a savings mode if you are not getting enough calories. But if you are eating 2,000 calories, give or take, of healthy fats, some small amount of protein based on your lean body mass target, you can find that calculation on the internet, and then minimizing carbohydrate, which are not essential. Some people say they are. For me, they're not. Your mileage may vary. I'll leave that to you. But if you're getting consistent calories every day with these macronutrients and the minerals that you need and so on, your body won't really have a need to store away in a calorie deficit mode energy, right? So to me, for my circumstance, 1,800 to 2,000 calories in one sitting, in one meal, healthy fats, avocado, olive oil, a lot of vegetables, spinach, kale, Brussels sprouts. It is plural because it's the country, Brussels sprouts. It's not plural, it's the S. Anyway. Some protein, eggs, feta, maybe some nuts. Those are minor sources. And then minimal, no croutons, no crackers on the side, no nothing like that. That's like a full day's calories. I'm not entering a calorie deficit. I'm not starving myself. I'm just eating one meal a day. And it's because there's no carbohydrates, my body becomes fat adapted and I'm consuming ketones, not storing carbohydrates in fat. In fact, you're using the fat that if you need more calories, your fat adapted body can start consuming some of your reserves. And as Dr. Fong in Australia says, the reason you're storing those is so that you can use them when you need the energy. You're not storing them and then you can't starve yourself. You're not starving yourself. You are putting yourself in a mode where you need to tap your reserves. That's why they're there. So use them, right? So the pandemic, up until today, the pandemic was a game changer to be sure. No more gym. So I moved to walking and insular forms of exercise, mostly walking in my neighborhood. I would walk 3 miles a day. So instead of 6 miles every 2 days, 3 miles a day. Somewhat hilly, so not like completely flat. Ultimately, this was not quite the same as a more focused gym routine. And this did have an impact on my overall keto state. We all get older, of course. My left shoulder really needs some mobility. It's getting a little stiff. And lately, my left knee is troubled by muscular tension in the quadricep and the calf muscle, which I believe, I didn't even check this. I did it the first time. I believe that's the gastrocnemius, but calf muscle. So my calf tight, 2 of the 4 quadriceps tight, and that ends up pulling my knee joint out of place, and it just kills me. So once I figured out how to deal with this, I have my Theragun, which is one of those massagers that like punches you with a sphere or some other attachments. So it's not a vibrating massager, it's like a punching impact massager. So I kind of put that into the muscle, and it fatigues the muscle, and that has been instrumental in generally improving those. But there's still that like, oh, for a couple months, I was barely walking. It was hard to get around. I was walking, but it was painful. I was limping. That really digs into your gym. So if you personally are having trouble sleeping, sleep is critical, by the way, having trouble sleeping, having trouble getting around, if you find yourself snacking, there's all these things that start throwing off this type of focus, and then you have to figure out if this is for you or not. So for me, getting back into a regular exercise schedule that reaches the target levels frequently is fundamental, and that's been impeded by some, getting old injuries kind of things, but serviceable. Once I figured out that this was happening with my knee, for example, the road to recovery was pretty easy. So it's been improving for the past few weeks. Stairways get easier, walking gets easier, taking a curb, stepping up onto or off of a curb and landing on the street, even though it's a couple of inches, that is an impact. And that was really painful back a couple months ago, 2 months ago. And now it's getting back to normal. So, kind of 80 to 90% back to normal. That's good. But during the time when you are in pain or having difficulties of any kind, you can't pursue your exercise plans. And then you might find yourself, I'm kind of hungry. I might as well just eat. I'm not going to the gym. And that undoes some of your hard work. And I'm still speaking to me. So my shoulder still needs work. I just need to literally increase mobility. Like I need to move it around about 10 times as much as I am. Fasting is essential for me, and one must recognize that fasting gets easier and easier. So there's a bit of an activation hill to climb. So like, I'm so hungry. But I realized pretty quickly, I'm going to eat later. So, and then if I kind of distract myself, like if you can time it correctly, if you are sleeping when you have the normal hunger, the ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone that induces the sensation of hunger, you'll eventually find like, it's just because I normally eat at 5 p.m. or noon or whatever. So the ghrelin is there to say like, don't forget, you're hungry, right? You got to eat some lunch. So if you can learn to ignore that, then you kind of enter I'm going to eat when I feel like it or when I want to or in my 2-hour window. And if I can start off into into ketosis, into that state with a 48 to 60 hour fast, which is only 2 to 2.5 days. If I can do that coupled with, that for me is what works. Your mileage may vary wildly. Throw some exercise in there, squeeze out that glycogen, get rid of some of those minerals and water, have an MCT oil coffee in the morning, and then readapt to what's called fat adapting, right? Your body becomes more and more adept at using the fat calories. It doesn't take too long, especially to readapt. The first time it might take a while, but again, I don't know what the time is. It depends on you. But readapting needs to happen. So that's usually where I'm kind of bouncing, which is annoying. So until I can get into my regular regimen, which I already know works, I already wrote a bunch of Medium articles about it, which you can read. Plain old laziness or distraction by work and other matters, my deviations from a regular exercise routine that I know works for me. These are all hurdles to get over. Your hurdles might be different. You might have none of these concerns. The good news, though, I already know where those hurdles are and how to get over them. It's a matter of getting back onto the track, like running on a track, like a racetrack, if you like, whatever. Getting back on the track and executing. And this is true of just about everything in life anyway. So that's what I have to say. Let us find out if this recording went well. If you're considering a keto adventure yourself, remember to do your research, do your reading. Try not to listen to people if they tell you what you should do. If you talk to somebody who is familiar with keto, that's one thing. But if it's somebody who's, I didn't like keto, I'm sticking with pizza and Red Bull, that's a different conversation. But if this was useful and it gives you some things to think about and to research, great. If it was interesting from the perspective that you would never do this ever, okay, that's fine too. I personally, once I got my menu dialed in and figured out when I could have a keto Cheeto day and what you can say get away with. Like once you know that you can have a heavy cream in a coffee, if you want to make yourself a little heavy cream cappuccino in the morning or a latte in the afternoon, that's pretty much keto friendly. You're not going to throw off your insulin or your glucose levels. Not enough to worry about, although you can test your levels and see what happens. Yeah, that might not be good for you, but you can find out for yourself. So I'm going to leave it here. Hopefully this second recording works out better than the first. I will hope you have a nice day, and thank you for listening, and take care.